I seen a recent boxing scene article where they were quoting Joyce. Basically, he was talking about his comeback. He's looking to come back in the month of March. Talking about potentially looking to come back somewhere in, well, basically in Saudi. So this March the 9th card, which Frank Warren is still talking up. I know that was the date that they were talking about doing Wilder versus Joshua prior to Deontay Wilder taking that L against Joseph Parker. Now, with the Saudis, they seem to plan for every eventuality. So they seem to have a backup plan in line like they did with the Day of Reckoning card. As I said in separate videos, that was not the card that they necessarily wanted to do. They wanted to do Fury Usyk. But obviously, things happened. That fight got pushed back to February, but they were able to pull this card pretty much just like that. It was really crazy, really, to think that they were able to do it so quick. With March the 9th, I'm sure there's something else they can do. And if it's as big as Warren's making it out to be, we could have another big, massive card on, which is obviously a good thing. Now, Joyce obviously had a fairly, 2022 for him was a pretty good year. And he ended the year by beating Joseph Parker in 11 rounds, doing a better job than both Joshua and Dylan White did. To go into 2023, what's your reward? Well, you go and you fight Zhilei Zhang. You get busted up in the first fight. Amazingly, I think Zhang, well, when I was at that press conference for that fight, one of the guys in Zhang's team said that Joyce was ahead on one of the scorecards, which is bizarre because that was fairly one-way traffic in that fight for Zhilei Zhang. You lose that fight, you lose your mandatory status, but then you get a rematch and you get obliterated in 3 rounds, I think it was. I think it was 3 rounds, 3 or 4 rounds in the rematch. So yeah, not a great 2023 for Joyce. But he's talking about coming back. And at this point in his career, what really is there for him? I mentioned that for me, the fight to make for Daniel Dubois after the Jarrell Miller fight, which he won, is the Joyce rematch. It just seems so easy to make. They're both with Queensbury. There's that needle there. Daniel Dubois 3 years ago lost it, but since then he's gone on to do good things. Joyce has stagnated and took 2 back-to-back L's. So there's it's a different ball game this time around, you would think. It's a chance for Dubois to redeem himself. Many people felt that he did redeem himself following on from the Usyk fight in the Miller fight, but this is a chance to actually redeem yourself against the guy you quit against in the first fight. Albeit, yeah, you did have the eye injury, fair enough, but still you can avenge that loss and do it against the guy who took your O. So that was the fight I was thinking of. Now, Warren has talked about that March the 9th card having Joseph Parker on it. And Joyce in, I think it was a Boxing Social interview, talked about if Dubois fights Parker, he'd like the winner. That's interesting, isn't it? If Dubois fights Parker, now it could be just a throwaway kind of comment there, but maybe he knows something. I'm only speculating. I'm not saying that it's going to be Joyce versus Dubois on that card, but because Warren has been mentioning Joshua for Dubois. Warren's, now that Dubois got that win over Miller, Warren is mentioning, Dubois with everybody now almost. If they did do Parker Dubois, that's a really interesting fight. Because Parker is coming off the back of a good performance against Wilder. He buzzed Wilder in the 8th round. But it was a fight that, Joe Parker left without a scratch on his face because Wilder just seemed so not himself in there. Not to take away from Joseph Parker, definitely not, but it was an easy fight all in all. Well, just look at the scorecards. It was clearly an easy fight for Joseph Parker. Him against Dubois, who is a lot more aggressive, has a very good jab. But the jab that Wilder was trying to get working, which was not great on fight night, Dubois' jab is way better. Way better. It's not even way better. That would be a really intriguing fight. That would be an absolutely massively intriguing fight. Parker versus Dubois. Could Warren be looking to do it? Obviously Parker's dealt with Queensbury before. Well, he dealt with them on the Day of Reckoning card, obviously with the Joyce fight, and I think he would have dealt with them on the Fury card, the Fury and Ngannou cards. He fought on that fight as well, on that card as well. So that could potentially be one. Warren has always, people have said this, and it's true to an extent, that Warren with Dubois and with Anthony Yarde, those two specific fighters, since they've turned over, because they turned over, well, Yarde was with Warren before Dubois because Dubois turned pro in 2017. But he's always, those two particular fighters, he's always had a father-son relationship with those two fighters. He's always been very close with those two. those two. I know Yard is an Arsenal supporter and they go to games together the odd time because obviously Warren is as well. I'm not sure really if Dubois is even into football, but he's always had a very close knit relationship with those two. You look at the Joe Joyce fight that he had with Daniel Dubois. Joe Joyce was a Queensbury fighter. Joe Joyce with Queensbury, promoted by Frank Warren. It was an in-house fight. Dubois lost, and Frank Warren had the look on his face as though Joe Joyce was a matchroom fighter, if that makes sense, because it looked like an away fighter came in, be his guy and is leaving, to sail off into the sunset. No, that's still your fight. You can still work with Joe Joyce. But Warren had that resigned look of like, oh my God, what am I going to do? It's like, well, you promote him. It's not really a loss either way. But he obviously had so much stock in Daniel Dubois. And some would argue that maybe that Zhang fight, putting him in there with Zhang, when he really didn't need to be fighting him, he could have had a much easier opponent. Maybe it was Joe Joyce's work, maybe, I don't know. But some people would speculate that maybe that was Frank Warren's revenge. How dare you beat my prospect, even though I'm promoting you as well. But how dare you? It's a weird one for Joe Joyce because he beat Joseph Parker 2022. He was set to have a good 2023. And yet Parker is the guy, raking the cash in on those Saudi shows, getting a win over Deontay Wilder. Now Joe Joyce is we're talking about him in this video as in like, well, what fights are there for him? It's an interesting one. But go back to Parker Dubois, I like that fight. I do. I think that's a really good fight. And Parker's been looking a lot better under Andy Lee. Dubois looked very good against Miller. Seemed a rejuvenated fight. Seemed, as I said, reborn. I was like, wow, where was this guy? Where was this guy? And I think that if that fight was made, that's a really intriguing fight. And if Joshua was on the card, well, that wouldn't even be the main event. Amazing. That's a really good fight in of itself. Would Joe Joyce Joe Joyce would even deserve to fight the winner. Because honestly, I do, as much as I like that fight, I think that Joe Joyce, the fight that I would do for him, other than Dubois, but I don't know how feasible this is, but again, the Saudis, God knows what they can do, would be a loser leaves town match against Deontay Wilder. Would you not like to see that? Joe Joyce versus Wilder. That really would be loser leaves town. They're both 38 years old, I think. That would be a fight I'd be looking at if I was like in the kind of inner third of the Saudis. I'd be like, if Wilder's going to fight again, let him and Joyce lose. That's a proper loser leaves town match. Because if you beat Joe Joyce and you're Deontay Wilder, it's like, okay, maybe there is something still there. But if you lose, you're like, well, that's that. And likewise with Joe Joyce. So, anyway, that's my thoughts on everything. Let me know if we do get this March 9th card, which Warren is simply indicating that we will. God knows who's going to be on it, but looks likely. What do you think? Do you think we would get Dubois versus Parker? Could we get a rematch of Dubois versus Joyce? Again, as I say, that would be, for me, the logical next fight for Daniel Dubois. Logically, I would say that makes a lot of sense. Because Dubois is on a high, Joe Joyce is definitely on a low. So, and you're both with Queensbury. Nothing to lose. That's what I think about that. But let me know yours in the comments below. I hope you enjoyed it, people. Smash the like button if you could. Hit subscribe, of course, as always, if you haven't already. Lads, I'll leave it with that. Peace.